Hey guys, I wanted to get this video out as early as possible because what you are looking at right now is going to be the next top tier trap deck, Dinorphia. This dinosaur cosplay deck takes advantage of a series of cards which are difficult to keep off the board, and supports them with the use of trap cards, similarly to a deck like Altergeist or Eldritch, but unlike those decks, this deck has a boss monster that's very easy to summon and functions as a walking mystic mine. However, in order to use this boss monster effectively, our life points need to be as low as possible. Luckily, all of the trap cards half your life points on activation. That's right, the gimmick is playing with as few life points as possible. Luckily, the trap cards also protect you from taking damage while in graveyard. So, let's go ahead and see how this deck functions in action.
I don't know, Chels. Isn't messing with your DNA a bit drastic?
Our first match is going to be up against rank 4 water. Luckily, we're going first, and we opened one of our trap Red Eyes fusion. We have two in this deck, Domain and Frenzy. Both of these traps by themselves give you access to Rex, which is your floodgate boss monster, and they get to it through similar means. Now we can't use the effect of Domain in order to go directly into Rex, but what we can do is go into one of our other fusions. That fusion has the ability to copy a trap card effect in our graveyard. So by copying Domain, we can use this effect a second time in order to go into Rex that way. Either way, this is beneficial for us because we want our life points to be as low as possible whenever we summon Rex. That's because our opponent can't activate monster effects of monsters whose attack are higher than your current life points or equal to it, as long as you control Rex. Additionally, if our opponent does destroy Rex, we'll be able to float into one of our other fusions instead of having to float back into one of the level 4s. But the two level 4s are a resource loop that is also set up through the effective Domain. In general, all monsters in this archetype do float. Our second replay is up against Goki, and it demonstrates a few of the weaknesses that this deck has. The primary one being, if this deck's fields do get successfully wiped, you don't recover very well. You can recover similarly to how Eldritch would, by looping singular cards in order to keep advantage, but the loss of momentum is pretty drastic. Additionally, you could recover by utilizing your Red Eyes fusion trap cards, but unfortunately, you only have 6 fusion materials in your main deck. As of right now, there's only 2 monsters in the archetype that go in the main deck, so you don't always have the materials that you need later on in the game in order to recover off of singular cards like that. That said, even in a simplified game state, this deck can be really hard to kill. Your counter traps, for example, in the graveyard prevent you from taking battle damage, and you also have a lot of cards that are singularly powerful that can prevent your opponent from killing you in a single turn. That said, even if it is difficult to finish you off, it's going to be just as difficult for you to end up winning. Assuming that your opponent doesn't overextend and walk right into a Ferret Flame, you're going to need one of your in-theme trap cards in order to fully recover to the point where you can actually win the game. For the remainder of this game, I attempt to stall in hopes of finding one of these trap cards, but unfortunately, I never end up getting one. For the last of our replays, I decided to do a best of 3 versus Tri-Brigade just to show how viable this deck is. Now to our benefit, we are going first, and realistically we should be winning any matchup against Tri-Brigade where we go first. In a simplified game state, we do kind of just auto-win if we summon Rex. In fact, most monster-heavy decks in the meta just kind of auto-lose to Rex. Even cards like Dragoons or DPE don't really stand much of a chance against it since they can't use their on-field effects. Rex doesn't stop grave effects though, so you do need to watch out for that. But that's not the only reason why this matchup is favorable. We're playing triple Ferret Flame, and Ferret Flame is hilarious in this deck. It forces your opponent to shuffle back monsters they control until the total attack of all monsters they control is less than or equal to what your life points currently are. Since you're going to be playing with as few life points as possible, most of the time it's going to force your opponent to shuffle back all monsters they control. As of right now, the record for the lowest life that I've ended a game with was 5. Yeah, 5 life points, and I won that game. Now for our second game against Tri-Brigade, we're going to be going second, and luckily, we opened Frenzy. Now this is the same fusion trap that we opened in the last game, but going second, you really want to see this card, because it lets you fusion summon using one monster from your extra deck and one monster from your main deck. This lets you cheat the requirements in order to summon Rex directly off the card. So if you really have to, you can let your opponent intentionally bring down your life points, and then activate Frenzy in order to summon Rex when your life is as low as possible, just to lock your opponent out of the game. So between Frenzy and Ferret Flames, we have two really funny ways to play around to destroy Phoenix Enforcer. Now we also have Soul Eating Oviraptor in hand, which is something really important to talk about here. I only play a single copy because we have Fossil Dig. Fossil Dig can search it, so you only need to play one, and I would only ever play one in this deck. But Soul Eating Oviraptor does enable a very easy OTK that this deck can perform by destroying your level 4 and then bringing back one of your monsters in grave, triggering the effect of the level 4 you destroyed. If you're familiar with the more traditional dinosaur build, it's sort of like being able to play babies that aren't bricks. They special summon from grave instead of from deck, which isn't a huge deal here, and they're productive all on their own. Most of the time, you don't want to start with Soul Eating Oviraptor. It's not a terrible card to start with because, of course, it's a Stratos. But in this deck, Soul Eating Oviraptor isn't a starter, it's a finisher. It also lets you search Ultimate Conductor Tyranno on summon, which is almost always live in this deck since you're using your monsters from deck to fusion summon. So Oviraptor and Superconductor Tyranno are really good in this deck, but I'd never run more than one of either one of them. But as you can see, we made very easy work of Tri-Brigade, even while going second and dealing with a Destroy Phoenix Enforcer. I hope this video was helpful in explaining why I think this deck is going to be so good. I genuinely think it's going to be like the next Ultrageists or like the next Eldritch. It's not as splashable as Eldritch, so it's hard to compare to that, but it is an extremely powerful trap deck, and I think it is going to be pretty popular when it comes out. Now this deck isn't going to be fully released whenever it does come out, because this deck isn't like super playable until we get Rex in Dimension Force, but whenever it does come out, I would recommend picking up the stuff preemptively. That said, there is one thing that I think this deck is still missing before it becomes extremely playable, and that's a third main deck monster. As of right now, you have to be kind of conservative on how you use your fusion trap, so if we can get another main deck monster, they become way more versatile, and I think we're probably going to get a third main deck monster at some point. When we do get that, might justify playing a deck that auto loses in time. Thanks for watching the video. If you liked what you saw, consider commenting, or subscribing. It really helps the channel grow, and I know I appreciate it.